What is up, guys? Good afternoon and happy Tuesday. Today we are talking about interview questions, specifically one particular kind of interview question and a model answer that I'm going to give you that will help you navigate this one. The question takes many different forms and is hard to answer because it's something that we all do kind of automatically but don't really stop to think about how we do it. And that question is time management. How do you manage your time? Very straightforward. It could be more in the form of how do you manage your time between competing projects, or how do you split your focus when you have a lot of things on at the same time? Or it can be how do you prioritize work given tight deadlines? Thankfully, this question does have a textbook answer, which we're going to talk about today, and in a rare intersection of theory and practice is actually a genuinely useful textbook answer that can help evaluate how you do actually do time management. So today I'm going to introduce you to the time management strategy first popularized by the late President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Eisenhower Matrix. Drum roll. The Eisenhower Matrix splits your to-do list across two axes. On the horizontal, you have how important the task is, and on the vertical, you have how urgent the task is. And by splitting these in this way, you generate 4 quadrants of the matrix that you will put your tasks into. This is a concept which will be familiar for anyone who has played Go, because fights are urgent, but corners are important. The 4 quadrants can then individually each be considered. In the top right-hand corner, you have things that are important and urgent, and what you do with those things is you do them. They are your highest priority items, they are the most important, they have the tightest deadlines. Make these your focus. What about important but not urgent? Schedule them for later. There are some things that do not have a finite deadline. They will continue rolling on into infinity. If something is important but does not have a strict deadline to it, you need to schedule it in so that it will get done, because otherwise it may not end up at the top of your pile. Now let's take the next easy one. What about things that are not important and not urgent? Well, depending on which book you read, there are different options for this. I'm going to say bin them, because if they're not important and not urgent, why are you doing them at all? Finally, things that are urgent but are not important. And we're going to come back to this one later, but the book, the theory, says delegate it. And I'm just going to leave that there for now. I'm going to leave that hanging. We're going to come back and talk about that. First though, let's go through some examples. Things that are urgent and important. Things that you have to prioritize now. Priority 1 escalations, anything that's about to break an SLA. But also internal things fit into this box as well. Doing, say, the performance reviews for your team clearly has a deadline to it and is clearly very important. And so these things fall into the high importance, high urgency bracket. How do you prioritize work within that bracket? Well, we'll come back to that, okay? But the thing to remember is you need to be very picky about what is actually in this quadrant, because it's very easy for all work to appear to be important and urgent, but you do actually need to be quite strict about what you put into this box. Let's talk about the scheduling box, the things that are important but not urgent. And I said before, these are going to be things that might never get to the top of your pile, so you have to schedule them in. Examples of this: improving your recruitment process. If you're like me, you kind of view recruitment as the most important thing you ever do, but it's never going to be urgent. So if there's something you want to do to improve your recruitment process, you probably need to schedule that in. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room, things that are urgent but not important. Delegate it. And this is where we get to the most controversial segment in here, and this is controversial on a couple of reasons. Now, the usual criticism for the delegation quadrant is that if you are an individual contributor, you do not necessarily have anyone to delegate work to. And that is true to an extent, because it is totally possible to delegate to peers. The other thing is that managing your manager is a real thing and is also a good skill you should learn. And if you have urgent work that is not important enough to hit that critical threshold, escalating that to your manager so that they're aware that this urgent work is not going to be able to be done is also a form of delegation. However, my issue with this quadrant saying delegation is it's making the implication that what you do with work that's not important is give it to other people. And this is where you have to be very conscious about what you're doing, right? Because there is no way to piss a team off quicker than to give them unimportant work to do. So is there a way that we can improve this or slightly correct what's written here? Well, I think so. I would say rather than the horizontal axis being importance, I would say it should be to what degree does something need your attention specifically? You know, does it need you? And if no, then the left-hand quadrants now make a little bit more sense. Now, examples of things that need your attention specifically are going to be things like, well, there's a server that only certain people have admin rights on, and so this task needs your attention specifically. Or you have holiday requests from your team which need approval ASAP, so you need to go and do that, and you need to go and do that soon. And as you now go down this scale, you get to other activities which can be done by anyone. But now we're not talking about its importance or not, it's just the level, the degree to which it requires your attention. Now, what further improvements can we make to the Eisenhower Matrix? Because it is a very simple model and it misses a few really key aspects to time management, which I think are very important, particularly if you're doing technical work. The Eisenhower Matrix has nothing to say about how long the work will take, what specific skills are required, how complicated the work is, and whether there are any dependencies or synergies. It is only ranking things based on importance or urgency. As you'll know if you've seen my video on context switching, and I will put a card here, you will know that switching between different projects frequently causes losses in efficiency. And so importance and urgency are not the only two things that you need to consider when you're thinking about how to prioritize work. So if I were to make improvements to this, which I would humbly call the that design feel matrix of time management, patent pending, I would again keep it in a quadrant format because A, that's easy to print in a book, and B, it's easy to understand and communicate. But I'm going to go ahead and make the assumption that all of the work on here is important and urgent, and it's all kind of equally important. Let's say this is a way of subdividing things that are in that top right quadrant in the Eisenhower Matrix, the do it quadrant, the high importance, high urgency stuff. So I'm going to take that stuff and I'm going to stretch that stuff across two axes, low and high, as before. This time though, it's going to be the amount of time required to complete that task. Is it a quick task or is it a long task? And the second axis is going to be complexity. Is it a complicated task? Is it a simple task? Note that these two things are independent of each other, in that you can have tasks that take a long time that are very simple. And similarly, you can have tasks that are very quick but very complicated. Let's go through this matrix. This time we're going to start in the lower left-hand corner, the low complexity, low time tasks. This is where do it comes in. If an email response is a 1-second response or a decision that you need to make, just do it. Fight against the proliferation of meetings by sending that email. You do not necessarily need to discuss it with people. Next, let's go to the opposite quadrant here. We're going to talk about the high complexity, high time tasks. What do you do with those? Well, these are the ones you now schedule. If it's high complexity and is going to take you a long time, you need to block out an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or however long it is to sit and work through it. It's because this is deep thought. This is the stuff where context switching kills your efficiency. That's why you schedule it in. Examples of long, high complexity tasks are making your mock-ups, mapping out your user flows, writing up your personas. These are activities you need to get into and spend several hours working on, which is why you need to schedule them in. And if you're not the kind of person that puts meetings in your Outlook calendar where only you're attending, you could think about starting being that person. I certainly do that. I block myself into meetings where I'm the only attendee so that I can do the high complexity, high time required work. Next, let's talk about the high complexity, low time required work, the quick work that's highly complex. What do you do with that? That's the time you go and find an expert, right? Now this is kind of like delegation. And if you can find an expert to try and answer some of these questions for you, the chances are they can answer these complex things faster than you could find out the answer to them yourself. Finally, what do you do with the stuff that's going to take a long time but is very simple? This is the stuff that you can context switch for. I call this split and fill. Have you ever seen that demonstration where you have the glass bowl and you put the big rocks in first, and then you put the sand in, and then you fill the water, and at each time the bowl is full? This is kind of like that. For low complexity stuff, context switching is less painful. I'm thinking things like filling out your timesheets, submitting your expense claims. These are the kind of activities that you can do a bit of in the 15 minutes you have between meetings and then come back to later. You don't need to schedule this stuff in, you just do it, but you do it when you have time to do it in between your other things. And that concludes what I want to say about time management. So if you find yourself in an interview at some point in the future and you get some variation on this question, feel free to use this example. If you're uncomfortable using this example, just use the Eisenhower Matrix example. It's literally from the textbook, and your recruiters, your hiring managers probably know about the Eisenhower Matrix. You can probably just name drop Eisenhower Matrix. I prioritize my time using the Eisenhower Matrix, and that's probably enough. They might get you to explain it, in which case you should probably be able to explain it, I guess. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please consider leaving me a like and subscribe. The channel is continuing to grow. We're pretty close now to 200 subscribers. I think as I'm recording this, I'm at 180, which is amazing. If you have any questions about the Eisenhower Matrix or about how I've modified the Eisenhower Matrix for my own purposes, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. And as ever, I hope we'll chat again soon.